Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. Tonight we'll be covering Modern Man in Search of a Soul. We'll be covering specifically Chapter 5, The Stages of Life. Go ahead and type exclamation point in the chat to share your takeaways from this chapter. Please be brief, and Shrikant will be joining us shortly. He's currently on a call. Avanique.
Okay, so I'll take an attempt at this. So my thoughts were that I thought it was weird how he went through the stages of life. It's like youth and old age are bookends, and it felt like when I was reading it that they kind of had the same qualities, like kind of carefree. They were learning, youth is coming into this life, and with old age you're leaving this life, so you're preparing yourself. But in the middle, it's kind of just like this thing where he was saying that it shouldn't be like just an appendage, and it almost felt like you should just kind of know, like what you're doing at this stage. It wasn't, and I almost feel like it should be a transition a little bit. So I just wasn't sure about like where do middle age fit in. So I felt like, the old people, he was saying, they would be either two ways. They would either kind of be stingy or stubborn, or they would be more youthful and playful and just like not have a care in the world. But like the middle age is kind of like one of those things where, your parents aren't past, so you're kind of just in that stage. And he named it as 35 to 40, when you're just trying to figure it out. So and maybe I'm just a little more sensitive about it because I am in middle age. But yeah, it was little I was a little lost a little bit, but it just seemed odd. Like it seemed like it focused more on middle age than anything.
Sure, thank you. Would anybody else like to share their takeaways on Chapter 5, The Stages of Life? So has anybody, was anybody here, that was here on Sunday night, did they actually see any kind of relationships between what Mariel had said? Oh, go ahead, Penny, please.
I just thought that it was rather intriguing when he was talking about like the vertical axis of like the Gothic age, when everybody believed everything was from God and a creation from God, and your soul was linked to that. And then the horizontal age, when it was like everything was science and it was the material world and everything was linked from that, and that there's really no reason, if you're thinking about it rationally, either axis, there's no way you can prove anything, but that the fact that he felt like it was part of the human psyche to believe kind of the beliefs that were presented by your culture. So when they were in the Gothic age, everybody like believed that was true, and anybody who didn't believe it was a heretic. And now anybody who questions science and the dominance of the material world is like considered a heretic. So to me, that was kind of intriguing, because you usually don't hear that. At least I don't hear that espoused, that this kind of just almost an innate human belief in what your current culture is. And he pointed out, he felt that this was something that was part of like the psyche, because people truly believed it, and it was unquestioning for most people. But there really was no reason to believe either of those things.
Thank you, Penny. Would anybody else like to share their takeaways with chapter 5? Boo.
Yeah, I'm kind of along the lines of what Penny was just talking about. My mind stuck on how he specifically brought up the afterlife. That in the afternoon of a person's life, if you're taking a scientific, materialistic, rational perspective, you're going to die and there's nothing to look forward to. But that if you don't, it seemed like he was alluding to a subjective need to see something beyond one's death. Like, he compared it to, this was written a while ago. So these days we know there's no life on Mars, but he was talking about how we can sit around imagining there's life on Mars, but we can't prove it or disprove it, at least at the time he wrote it. But just that, just because you can't prove or disprove that there isn't an afterlife, I think he was trying to spell out some subjective need for seeing something beyond, something to look forward to, something that you're working towards, or else why don't you just give up and fall apart? I kind of felt like was the gist of it, but I forgot how he worded it. I think he said imagining yourself as like the sun dawning on distant nations on the other side of the world. And I thought that was kind of poetic. And if you do a little bit of work, you don't necessarily have to believe in a religious afterlife or one of the traditional afterlives per se, but that there's something beyond your own personal mortality that you can contribute to. And I don't think he used the word transpersonal, but beyond the personal, I believe was similar to the way he worded it. But I thought that was interesting. I thought it was a much better explanation for like a drive for immortality than like what I've read in like the denial of death. He didn't seem to be hinting that man's main drive is a fear of death, but more like you've got to look forward to something beyond it, or else why don't you just give up? So that was what I took away from it. I thought it was interesting.
That's an interesting takeaway. Yeah, I feel like the reoccurring theme is that science is somewhat insufficient, specifically in our older age. But here is our real host, and so I'm going to leave it to him. But yeah, I think that there are a couple of quotes that I wouldn't mind sharing with you at some point, because I think that this is a reoccurring theme, obviously, where I think I almost see some Nietzschean aspects to what was written in this chapter, as in science is not sufficient in as far as a substitute for religion. But we'll get to that, and I'll hand it back to Shrikant.
Well, thank you, Joe. Thank you for taking care of this. So, folks, what we're going to do is that Maritza is next, and then I have a presentation. See, what we're doing is that I'm trying to understand Jung, and Jung is so hard. So I'm coming up with different ways. I've been doing different presentations. So today, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to draw this entire chapter for you. Okay, it's going to be very interesting. So that's what we're going to do. But first, let's go with Maritza while I set up. Maritza, go ahead.
I just wanted to, so Joe had asked us, what we got from this, or what our takeaway, or what was interesting. And, for me, it was as Bo just said, the idea of he likened, someone stages to the sun. One of the quotes, like the very end, he says, a human being would certainly not grow to be 70 or 80 years old if this longevity had no meaning for the species. And then he says, the afternoon of human life must also have a significance of its own and cannot be merely a pitiful appendage to life's morning. I just thought that was such a poetic way of reminding us that, the values, the priorities that we have in, a different, in various stages of life are not going to be the same. So, Evanik was talking about, the midlife, the middle phase, which is what Jung does focus on. But I think that it's a great thing to force us to consider that maybe those values that we held on to so tightly in a previous stage maybe they could stand and we could benefit from a revision of them. It's just like not just to assume that they're going to work for us, continuing forward. And then, he also talks about the importance of, I like that he brings up what religion did for us. And he points out and Bo, and forgive me if I'm saying your name wrong, but Bo also, he made that point to us, the idea that there was not a feeling that Jung was saying we needed to be religious for these, for us to move ourselves in any meaningful way throughout the stages. But he was paying homage to the fact that, religion played a role that allowed us to more easily move from stage to stage, which in today's culture, we ourselves have to address. Like the onus is more internal than it was before, when there was a much more religion dictated movement in our lives. And I just thought that was really interesting. Thank you.
Wonderful. All right, thank you. Thank you, Maritza. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this presentation. So it's going to be a drawing. So let me go ahead and make myself the co-host so I can share, make co-host. And then I'm going to share my screen here. Give me a second. All right. Okay, let's see here. I'm going to change the view so I can see. Okay, very good. Okay, folks, so this is very challenging, as you know, Jung is scary in terms of how many topics he deals with during each of his presentations. It's just incredible. So what I'm going to do is the following. I'm going to first, give me just a second here. So, all right. Joe, I'm going to leave letting in of people to you.
Okay.
On this one. Okay. Okay. So let me go ahead and mute everybody. Okay, very good. All right. So we're talking about stages of life. How are we going to talk about it? I'm going to draw it. So let me start with this. I'm going to put a line here. This is okay, give me a second here. I'm going to make it a little bit darker. Okay. Okay, so here we're going to be talking about stages. This is what we're going to be talking about, stages of life. Now, I'm going to approach it by looking at the problem. If you look at what the entire essay of Jung is talking about the problems of stages of life, okay? So on one side, we're going to be talking about the problem, okay? At the same time, Jung actually has solutions for it, but he has not fully explicated the solutions here. The solutions are there elsewhere, okay? But it's not fair to just leave the problem as problem. It's much better to talk about what are the possible solutions. So I'm going to be talking about the solutions of it on this side, okay? So this is going to be solution. What is the solution to the problem on this side? Now, I'm going to move both of these gentlemen here, and I'm going to make this just a second here. Okay, I think this is good. Let me see if I can do it like this. And I'm going to move this here so it gives me more space. All right, so we've got the stages, which is the topic. This is the topic that we are studying, okay? And we're going to look at the problem of stages of life, and we're going to look at solutions. Now, Jung is very clear. There are two sets of problems. There are problems connected with the first stage of life. This is first half of life, and problems connected with second half of life. Okay. Now for solutions, I'm going to go to Louis Sullivan because he, I think in the most concise way, proposes a solution, which actually, when you take in all of Jung, he's thinking along the same directions. And I will tell you later on that there are actually two versions of Jung's solution to the problem that we have already looked at these meetups, okay? So the way in which this part, I see it worked out, as far as the solution goes, there are two parts. One is here, and one is here. Don't like the shape of this. So this one leads to a solution like this, and there is a solution which is like this on this side. Okay, these are the two parts. Here, Louis Sullivan starts by restating the problem. One of the key ideas of Louis Sullivan is that when you state the problem, the solution just presents itself. So you have to restate the problem of stages of life. So that's going to be the first step. And secondly, he's going to talk about the solution. Okay, so this is the structure of the presentation at this level. Now, let me just go ahead and look at my notes here. All right. Now the first part, first half of life, Louis Sullivan says is divided into two parts. One is the childhood, and second one is the youth. So this is the childhood. I'll just call it child. And this is called youth. And the second part, second half of life, has two parts to it. One is the middle age. Okay. And the second one is, I'm just going to call it the end of life. Okay. Let's make this a little smaller, so I'll have more space to draw it out. All right. So this is the second level. Now let's look at the second level from Sullivan's perspective. So the problem, so let me just state out, he's saying that there are three parts of the problem. There are three parts. And you know what? Let me just color it up a little bit. So this part, let's call it green. This is all green, right? And including this one, I won't draw everything, but I think we have to get the colors right. These are the consequences. And on this side are all the roots. So I'm going to use this color for it. Okay, these are so this is the root of the problem, which will give you the solution to it. So now, in terms of problem, Louis Sullivan is saying there are three parts. Okay, and in terms of solution, also there are three parts. 1, 2, 3. This is not a good shape. All right. So let's look at the Louis Sullivan part first. Now, why am I looking at Louis Sullivan part first? Because it is very brief and it in principle offers solution to every problem, all of these problems that Jung is talking about. And it happens to be the same solution. The thrust of the solution is the same that Jung talks about through the rest of his work. He just hints about it here. All right. So I'm going to give you, instead of keeping you in suspense for solution, I'm going to give you the solution. Then I'm going to state out the problem in great amount of detail. I'm going to put more leaves here to describe the problem in detail as Jung presents it, and then again apply the solution to it. Okay, so this three-step process. So let's look at Louis Sullivan. What is the problem? What is the problem of human existence? Remember, we are looking at this particular work in the context of the book, The Modern Man in Search of His Soul. We just looked at the spiritual problem for modern man. Stages of life is just one manifestation of that. So let's keep focused on that, because that's going to offer solution to stages of problem. Here is the key statement of the problem by Louis Sullivan. This is from his autobiography. He says, life began to break in upon him. A continuous breaking in from the outside and breaking out from the inside was to shape his destiny. Okay? So life began to break in upon him. A continuous breaking in from the outside and breaking out from the inside was to shape his destiny. So there are three parts of the problem. One is there is break in. Second is break out. And third is continuous. This is not one time, this does not happen. This is continuous. Hour to hour, day to day, minute to minute, second to second. It's a continuous breaking in from outside and breaking out from inside. This is what he formulated, again, using Jung's ideas. This is when he formulated it, when he was a child. When he was in his youth, he came up with a solution which we are about to talk about here. He spent his middle life as an architect implementing that throughout his life. And he spent end of his life writing it up. So all the books that we have of him are there. Okay, so that is how he implemented it. What is the solution? Solution that he came to. His autobiography is called Autobiography of an Idea. And this is the idea that it is referring to. It says, form ever follows function. Form ever follows function. So there are three things here. One is there is function. Second, there is form. And third, there is follows. So what he's saying, this process of breaking in from outside and breaking out from inside is the function of human being. It's like breathing in and breathing out. You know, I was reading Julian Jaynes, and he points out the word psyche, its root, I think it's called psychein in Greek, actually meant breath, which was transformed to refer as a metaphor to to what goes on inside us. So it's important that breathing, you just don't just breathe in for a long time, for 18 years, and then decide to exhale. You can't wait to exhale for that long. So the process of breathing in and breathing out is crucial. Also note the word break. It's saying break in. That means something new outside. You're confronting something new that you did not know. It's going to surprise you. That is going to shake you up. That's what breaking in is about. This is a core part of Jung's philosophy. You know, in the filth it will be found. You have to confront your shadow. You have to look when you feel uncomfortable, not turn away. So breaking in from the outside. Again, it is breakout, break. It is never easy to have the courage. So breaking in from outside using serenity prayer. Breaking in, letting outside break in is the acceptance of what is, what you can't change. Courage to change the things you can is the courage to break out from the inside out. And wisdom is to do that all the time. Both these things all the time. That is the function. Form is how you modify things in order to implement the function. It could be your relationships to other people, words that you use, your emotions, your habits, all of those are forms. And follows, that means the form has to follow the function. This process of breaking in and breaking out, outside coming in, inside going out, is the function, is what human being is about, human consciousness is about. Everything else is forms. If you hold on to forms, long after they have stopped serving their function, they are going to stifle the function and kill it. The same form which served a function at one point, when the function changes, no longer serves. It's going to hurt you. Wishing to go back to the forms is attachment to forms. It is refusal to accept the function. So that is the solution, okay? Now we are going to work on, look at the problem. All right, the first part, the childhood. The childhood he describes in many ways. So I'm going to use about 5 different things here. So let's go like this. So he's saying several things about childhood. These are the things he says about childhood. Oh, I have not yet put them down. Okay. So it is using instinct. During the child is using instinct. So now I'm going to just flat out describe what Jung says in this chapter, okay? And then I will make some comments and I'll relate the roots to the trunk. And then I will briefly talk about various connections we have explored in our meetups, 52 Living Ideas meetups, with various theories connected to all of these leaves. Okay, so now we're going to the leaves. So there is instinct. This is the original idea of paradise, being in the womb, completely safe. This is, okay, I can't read this, okay. You're completely enveloped by family. And there are a couple other things. Okay, I'm just going to keep it aside. The youth is far more complex because that's where he's saying that there are essentially, that's a much more substantial branch. What he has to say about childhood is relatively small. So it's all of this. So I will have to use some branches. I'm sorry. So there are three main branches. This is one. This is two. Not well done. This is two. And this is three. Okay. So one of the greatest points that he makes is the problem. He calls it the problem of consciousness. Okay. And there I want to highlight 5 different things. So now I can go to leaves again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, I don't like the shape of these leaves. I'm going to make them similar to it so it looks like one tree. So I'm going to go like this, like this, like this, like this. This is by far the most profound point he makes. So first, he's saying that this is where, this is actually related to puberty. So I'm going to put this as this. This is saying it starts with puberty. Okay. He's saying that this is all about the child now adjusting to the outside. It is full of conflict between inner and outer. There is a tension that develops. This is the price of civilization. Before civilization, in the cultures like tribal cultures, you would never have this issue. It is full of uncertainty. So you can see the contrast here between this child phrase where everything is certain, everything is comfortable, it's paradise, you're enveloped by the family, to this part where you're suddenly out there, you're full of uncertainty, there are all kinds of conflicts going on, all kinds of tension, and this is all about interacting with people at large. The other branch here is regression. Okay, and this third branch here is, I'm calling it place. So why do you have to actually do this? Okay, and he talks at length about that. What you have to do is that you're adjusting. I'm going to put 3 or 4 things here. What you're doing is that you're finding your place. So you are, establishing yourself in the society during this time. Okay. You are achieving success. You are adjusting to the society. You have to give up something. You're giving up something. Renunciation, some core part of yourself. You're making a compromise. So here in this branch, right? In this branch, he is now describing the social part. Here in this branch, he was talking about internal consequences. Here he's talking about the external consequences. All right. Now, there are people who refuse to do that. And they regress back. So they regress back they cling. This is clinging. They cling back to childhood. They continue on inertia. And they pull back. Okay, so there is a regression that is possible. So this is about the youth. Now, what happens in the middle age? Now, in the middle age, let me see here. there is regress. Okay. What he's saying is that by middle age, again, I'm going to do two branches here. Which direction should I put them? Okay, I'm going to put them one going this way and one going out like that. Okay. He's saying, really, this is an opportunity of coming back to the self. He's saying, and let me put it very quickly. If you look at this part, the child part, it is saying it's all inside, all inside. It's not too much outside. This is letting outside breaking in, okay? And now you've succeeded, you've found a place in life. And now you're trying to go back to the inside. That's what he's talking about. Okay, so here I'm going to add, let me see, let me add about 4 or 5 things that he talks about. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, let's say. Okay, so firstly, it is experienced in a midlife crisis that you basically achieved everything that you wanted to do. You still feel that there is no meaning in your life. Having achieved everything, you say there is no meaning. This is the time where many people kind of turn back to culture. This is the time you find that, something is missing. You have a feeling that, okay, I've achieved everything, but something is missing in me, inside me. What you're looking for is, but what is the meaning of all of it? So these are some of the things he talks about, of the nature of that. And here again, you can choose to regress. And he talks about the various ways of regressing. So you're trying to go back. This is going to go towards these, all of these, going back like that. Not a good shape, but will do. So here, you're basically trying to do the same thing that you did in youth. But it has no longer any meaning for you, but you keep doing that. You can become rigid and you try to recapture your youth. What you're actually trying to recapture is the feeling that you had as a youth, but that time is gone. So the same thing is not going to give you the same feeling, all right? Now, let's come to the final one. Let's come to the final one. You reduce the brightness here a little bit. Okay, that's not bad. Okay, here, this one, I'm going to divide it into 3 things. So I'm going to put it in 3 branches. One going like this, one going like this, and one going like this. So he's saying towards the end of your life, there are 3 things that people focus on. Firstly, he makes the point that they are keepers of the culture. In traditional societies, they are keepers of the culture. This is the time where the wisdom is maximum. And then he talks about afterlife. Those are the 3 things he talks about towards the end of life. So again, I can divide this into, let's divide it into a few things. So here, some of the solutions that Jung talks about, and he develops that, he just barely touches on it here. He develops it quite a bit through rest of his work. So this is a way of integration. This is where you achieve integration, where you bring in, integrate the inside and the outside, integrate the conscious and the unconscious, rising to a new level of integration, new level of consciousness. Okay. Here in culture, that again, you can put it in various ways. You can say that these are the people who kind of preserve the culture, continue the culture. This is, again, the wisdom of the culture is all included in that. And the most interesting point here is that of afterlife. He's saying that you need direction. Towards the end of your life, you still need direction. And he talks about various religions providing it. Okay. So this is the entire tree. Now, I'll make some very quick comments on it. If you again come back, so now what we have done is that we have looked at this whole part here, which is the trunk. And we have also looked at this, which I think is the root. If you really look, if you take that breaking in and breaking out seriously, if you take that forms must follow function seriously, many of these problems just evaporate. Okay, it's a very, very large point. Now, I don't want to go through it myself in detail. I want to leave it out for people to think about, because the whole purpose of this presentation is to remind you of what was said, connected to a very large theme that we have done more than 50 meetups on. By the way, for people who were part of that, who were the panelists like Rupali and Maritza, for some reason, last 7 weeks, 1,000 people have been coming each day to watch Louis Sullivan videos. So I don't know why. I have not been able to track where they're coming from, but that's what has been happening. I wanted to make a few quick comments, connecting it to other thoughts. The biggest thing I have to say is the child. This depiction of child from birth to puberty, I don't think is true. I think consciousness develops in children much earlier than that. Montessori has deep things to say about this. We've looked at Piaget, who has amazing things to say about this. My favorite one is by Julian Jaynes. There is a gentleman called Bill Rowe who did just amazing lecture on development of consciousness in children on our meetup. I would recommend that. Joe, when you get a chance, can you search for Bill Rowe on 52 Living Ideas, ROWE? And if you could put that in the chat. Basically, the point is that the outside just does not come in when the child leaves the family. Mother is outside. And the outside doesn't always come as an unwelcome thing. It starts by being the most welcome thing. And the infant interacting with the mother, going back and forth. This is what Bill Rowe talks about. Initially as a rhythmic play, then pointing to a third object, and then slowly getting an idea of itself through interaction with the mother and other caretakers is how the consciousness builds. Then it is expanded with the use of language. A language is a crucial thing. Montessori system is all about developing the consciousness of the child aged 3 to 6. So there is a lot that goes on of the outside in and inside out in the child, as is compared to what has been said here. So that's the only point I want to make. There is all kinds of things that can be said about this, but my purpose here was to put these basic ideas on the table. Now, I would love to hear any comments about this presentation, or you can either do that, or you can pick up on any of the themes here and comment on it. So go ahead and type ! if you would like to comment on anything. Give me just a second. We'll start with Ebonique.
This helped me understand that chapter so much, because I was trying to express what I thought the chapter said. And I think the only part that I really kind of understood is middle age, and then maybe a little bit of older age, and then the afterlife. And this helped me understand youth. And I have to agree with you that I think kids are more in touch with their unconsciousness than we think they are. I think because they don't have any of those restraints put on them, especially when they're young, they can use their imagination, and they can, they can tap into it and not even know that they're tapping into it. For them, this is just like play and exploration. So anything that they're learning that they're the true definition of the outside breaking in and then the inside breaking out. Now, sometimes that's done in like, not so pleasant ways for adults. Like maybe it's a temper tantrum because they don't know how to express themselves, or they don't know how to express what they want. But I think they're closer to the unconscious than we think they are. And I think they have the ability, because they're children, they have more of the ability or permission to explore that a little more. And then as they age, we kind of like take that from kids a little bit. So yeah, so this helped a lot. So thank you.
Wonderful. Folks, if you would like to comment either on this or you can pick up any theme that the chapter talks about and talk about it. Joe.
Yeah, I think that this is a very, very deep chapter in general. There's a lot to be said about it. So let me just start with the child aspect of it. And I'm in full agreement as well with you. And obviously Rupali can speak to this much more eloquently than I could, dealing with children all the time. But the quote that actually stuck out to me is that the complex psyche of the child is, of course, a problem of the first magnitude of the parents, educators, and physicians. And left to their own devices, that children essentially, and I'm paraphrasing, left to their own devices, children don't have any problems of their own. And so it's interesting to see how the people around the children impact what is possible. And then this process, this I-ness, he calls, is something that when the child starts to say, who I am, and individuate themselves from their surroundings, is interesting to me, because this came up on Sunday night as well. The idea where the question was essentially when Jung was asked, should I think it was Muriel, I forget if I said her name correctly, I forget, was said that Jung was asked something about talking to a child. He said, well, I might as well talk to the parents to really understand where the child's coming from, because then I can understand the surroundings and what the issues are. But left to their own devices, the child is on its own is okay. So I think it's just saying what the environment and how the environment actually impacts the child and the child's development. And until it gets to a point where it becomes an individual, or a child becomes an individual from their surroundings, that's when the consciousness really starts to arise. Its individualness starts to arise. So I'm not in complete agreement with him, but I understand where he's kind of going with that. One of the things that I really found to be most interesting in this chapter was the midlife crisis. I mean, because it goes into that to kind of detail, and specifically the masculine and the feminine, how men become more feminine in their older age, and how women become more masculine, and that how this dynamic changes, and people don't necessarily know how to react to it, and how it impacts their marriages as well. I thought that was really one of the most fascinating points of the chapter itself. I have some other comments as well as far as older age and wisdom. I can come back to those.
I'll go let's go, let Boo make his comments.
Okay.
Then let's go like childhood, youth, middle age, and we will have like a whole range. I just, so let's go with that.
Yeah, let's do that. Sorry about that.
No problem. Let's, I'm just changing things depending on the flow of things. Next up is going to be Boo, followed by Rupali. Boo. Folks, feel free to make general comments as well. So whatever you want. Go ahead, Boo.
I wasn't trying to rush anyone. I was interested in what you were saying, Joe. But so I've got two questions. I've read other Jungians before, and I didn't realize how much he relied on, not relied, but references Nietzsche. Like, just from my understanding from other Jungians was that he thought Nietzsche was a bit of a psychotic man of personality. So this being the first book that I've read cover to cover by Jung himself, he actually seems to rely on him a lot. So I'm going to be looking for that his criticisms of Nietzsche. But one question, probably a bigger one, was I was curious, Joe, you mentioned what you had thoughts about how that chapter related to Nietzsche before the presentation was given. So I wasn't trying to rush you, but I guess my question was, what, as a follow-up, what was that? But the second question I had, which is possibly shorter, to Shrikant, was why Louis Sullivan as a autobiographical example to like put on this template of the stages of life? So those are my two questions.
Sure, excellent question. So what we'll do about Nietzsche, we'll take Nietzsche at the end of this. So if I forget, both you and Joe, please remind me, because I want to focus on the 4 ages first, and then we'll take the Nietzsche question. So why Sullivan? It's a very, very good question. We're really looking at like the problem, the spiritual problem of the modern man. We're looking at modern man in search of his soul. That is the theme that we're studying. That's the reason why we are studying Jung. Now, we have seen many, many, many different people talk about it. The interesting thing that is common to Jung and to Louis Sullivan is both of them are influenced by Indian way of thinking, the Indian view of the inner. Louis Sullivan is, gets that from the transcendentalist movements. Jung gets it directly by actually traveling to India and learning a lot about Indian thought. So that is what is common to that. Now, it is bringing in the same theme. Both these folks are actually writing around the same time in response to the First World War, reaction to First World War. Both of them are writing at the same time. So they are contemporaries. They're writing around the same time. It is that Louis Sullivan is towards the end of his life, and Jung is in the middle of his life at that time. Thirdly, this point about outside and inside. We have found in 52 Living Ideas that architects, for some reason, and we'll see what reason it is, actually capture this point about inside and outside and the proper relationship between them. Because their job is to build something outside, a building, that reflects the value inside, that makes people feel a certain way inside. So there is this thinking, and this is Louis Sullivan, Buckminster Fuller, Akoff, Harold Nelson, all of these people, and that's what I found common. The last reason was that formulation of breaking in and breaking out and form follows function is such a simple formulation. It's a principle that can be applied across. When you look at Jung's himself solution to it, actually, we have looked at 2 solutions of Jung to this question, which actually amount to the same thing. One is his portrayal of the concept of abraxas, you standing between order and chaos. That means you're taking in everything and you're reordering it. So his ideal of man as abraxas is essentially the same idea. Second, in the last essay that we studied, Spiritual Problem of Modern Man, his concept of modern man is also exactly the same thing. One who has mastered everything and who is open to the future. And he is living in the present. So both those are actually the same ideal that Louis Sullivan is talking about. But Louis Sullivan, I think, captures it, at least for me, he captures it far more precisely and far more powerfully. So he gives the same solution as Jung a little bit more clearly than Jung does. Jung, of course, expands on the proper dance between the conscious and the unconscious at various places in his work tremendously well. So that's why I thought it was appropriate to bring that up. And Nietzsche question we will take later. Rupali.
Hi, thank you. So I wanted to just go back to your diagram. Mm-hmm. And I think you did a very nice job of showing how the human potential flowers to its fullest form. We've talked about what is the human potential. And this diagram really shows, from childhood to afterlife, what the human potential looks like and all its branches and leaves. So I wanted to comment on that through Louis Sullivan's perspective of, when he talks about the human potential, he talks about having a childhood where you just explore the environment and adapt, like the whole breaking in and breaking out, of taking in the experiences of the environment and breaking out into, experimenting with the environment to see where the limits are, to see what the boundaries are. And then with that knowledge, you enter into the youth stage with confidence and don't go into regression, but you are confident. And the question about place is, who am I? Where am I going? Which leads to a fruitful middle age where then you are participating fully in society. And the realization of self, or focusing again on who am I and what can I give back to society, comes to full circle with this diagram. So I wanted to comment on that. And the second part was about breathing in and breathing out, or breaking in and breaking out. And the whole idea, we've studied the Gita, and in chapter 6, there's a whole explanation on how to breathe in and how to breathe out, or how to meditate. And basically you are focusing on your inner self when you do that breathing in and breathing out, which then allows you to center yourself to be able to do what Jung is saying in this diagram, and you're saying in this diagram. Just comments. I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I really like that. I want to point out one thing about breathing in and breathing out. So if you look at what Jung is saying at a very large scale level, what he's saying is that you breathe in here and you breathe out here. You let outside shape you first, and then you develop the inside, develop the wisdom, and then you shape the outside. What Louis Sullivan is saying is that, yes, but you have to do this not across your lifetime, but during each day, during each hour, during each minute. You're trying to take in and take out, or, to take in and then express yourself continuously, and that is how you grow. This is not something that Jung would disagree with. The other emphasis that is different between Jung and Louis Sullivan is that Jung is a psychoanalyst. So he's talking about the problems that he sees, and he's actually right, absolutely right about the commonalities of the problems that he's seeing. And that's what he's partly reporting on. Whereas Louis Sullivan is an architect, he's a prophet of what can be and what should be. And that's how he's writing. So that is the difference between the emphasis of the two. Katie, followed by Zach. Katie.
I respectfully disagree only with Rupali just on one point, maybe that I think the youth might, she was saying youth is confident. I think that might depend. I kind of see child as like exploring under the umbrella of your parents. Sometimes your parents even do stuff for you or make decisions. Sometimes a few decisions for you. And then maybe like youth, you go away to school. And then next thing you know, you're exploring and making decisions for the first time on your own. So I think that path there might be individuated.
Wonderful. Thank you, Katie. Next up is Zach.
I guess at a pretty early age, I hit on a lot of the themes that Carl Jung ended up spending his life talking about. So I feel like I have probably spent more time studying what Carl Jung was saying. So when I'm reading the chapter, it's actually falling into categories pretty clearly for me, what he's saying. There's a lot of confusion. The modern world has disintegrated in many ways with regards to the established order of society. I think what the youth phase of the first half of life, the way Jung describes it, he's writing in a time when there wasn't such an incredible chaos with regard to the meaning of life. Like not as many of society's institutions had decayed to the point that they are today, where they just seem like dead husks of something that once might have meant something. But in other words, the problems of the second half of life in our modern times are infecting, almost like gangrene or something, the first half of life for a lot of people. And that wasn't quite as intense when he was writing. So now, since I experienced this early, I experienced having the problems of the second half of life invade my reality in the first half of life. I might not be like I can't speak for somebody who is in love with society and is still able to devote their energy to sort of fitting in and having children, doing like what I see as youth, as what Carl Jung's talking about youth, is basically fitting into how society thinks of itself, assisted by the logic of the idea that society needs to function. So you need doctors, you need machines, you need people driving, you need all these jobs to be filled in order for the material aspect of society to function. And the idea of like youth is sort of like, okay, I'm gonna get married or something, or have children, and then I'm gonna fill one of these jobs that, in other words, society is the priority. Like you see your own value as the degree to which you can fit into society, you know? And so the second half of life is when, what Jung is talking about is when you've actually fit in to the degree that satisfies you. And so you're no longer obsessed with, because I think if one has never quite fit in or never quite achieved one's early life goals, it's going to be more difficult to sort of disinfect oneself in later life from the failures of earlier life. And Jung is very much not talking about failing in early life. He's talking about succeeding in early life, which I don't even know how common that is nowadays. I don't even know how often anybody actually feels like they've achieved their goals. But at a certain point, individuation is like, you're like, wait a second, society itself isn't good enough. Society itself isn't good enough. And I don't want to spend any more of my energy trying to.
Wonderful. Thank you, Zach. Great points. Next up is, I think you did a very good job of distinguishing between them. That you're trying to fit into the society. You're saying, okay, there is a place for me. I'm going to work very, very hard to get there. And then there is a place where you say, okay, I'm already there. Now what? Excellent. Maritza.
I just wanted to chime in here on something that Zach said. You know, I see the that what Jung is saying to us about that transition is it was not so much like you succeeded and that's why you moved to the second phase, but it's like it's the idea of, so your graph does a really nice job of helping us remember that what we're talking about here is a slide from unconscious reacting, as it were, with ourselves and our environment into a more conscious, intentional type of way of being. And I see the that switch over to you know, like the second branch there is, it's the idea of when we're younger, we have not yet fully formulated our own value system. So we are borrowing, or we have inherited the value system of our family, of our community, our culture. But hopefully we reach a point in life where we start to question those, and then we start to ponder, you know, is this really something that aligns with the things I believe? Do I really believe this? And what comes to mind for me is those of us who were raised in a very religious background, you know, and if it's a Catholic background, there's so many regimented rituals that we do, and you are raised doing it. So we spend so much of our youth just doing these over and over, and you go, like every week you go into the church and you reciting these things. At one point, you hit this realization, you stop, you're like, wait, what am I actually saying here? What are the actual words that I'm testifying to? And you become aware, as it were, or let's to use, you know, more Jungian terminology, consciousness. We're, instead of just blindly accepting, you know, I'm going to say the Apostles' Creed, just blindly and accept it. Well, now I'm consciously considering what the words are. And if I'm okay with them, going forward from that moment forward, it's no longer a blind following. Now I have reached a point of consciousness, and that becomes my value. So when I say it, it holds more meaning because I'm saying it with intent, because I've now taken it out of the realm of something that was, that I inherited as a cultural or familial value, and I have made it my own value. And I see that as something that Jung is inviting us all to do in the second phase. And I really like that he says, you know, it's different for others. He does give a time frame, but then he goes on to explain why for different people, it'll be different at different points. And, you know, it might seem almost funny, but it makes a lot of sense that if one's parents are alive, it takes a little bit longer to hit certain milestones than it might take others. But it's because, I think it's because some aspects in life will force that realization, the move from, you know, the unconscious into that, like, now you're so thinking about it, you're fully conscious, and you're either accepting or rejecting this as you move forward. So, you know, I feel like your graph does such a nice way to streamline it. And for me, it shows that separation there, where what came before may not have been in the realm of my consciousness, even though there were things I was identifying. So I may hold a value today that I previously held as a value before, but it was not really my value. But hopefully I have advanced enough in my consciousness that today, if it's something I'm saying I value, I've made that separation. And I'm sure there's probably some for which I haven't, but that was just what I was thinking. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Maritza. Great points. What I want to do is now I want to talk about what we can do next. So I want to bring up this diagram one more time here. So, if you look at this diagram, right, the things that I want to talk about next is first, this is really fascinating part where he talks about problems of consciousness. So I would love to talk about that first. Then we're talking about this part, which is the development of development of self in the middle age. And then I want to talk about this part, which is going to be very difficult to talk about. So at least these three parts I want to talk about. So one by one. So let's talk about the problem of consciousness in the youth, where a sheltered person is, suddenly finds himself or herself with the problem of integrating with this world, which he doesn't know, which has different priorities. He doesn't really, and so there is this conflict between inside and outside. And it's really fascinating that Jung is saying that is how consciousness is born, in that interaction, in that going back and forth and trying to integrate the other with yourself. So just on this point of the problem of what he calls problem of consciousness, or the birth of consciousness, go ahead and type exclamation mark if you'd like to comment on that. After that, we'll be comment on the middle age and then the end of life. Joe.
So I'll be brief. There's one part of because I do want to comment on the middle-aged, because I think that's a really interesting.
We'll come to that.
We're
going to do 3 rounds.
Okay.
Right now, we're just talking about the youth and the advent of consciousness. Once everybody has commented on that, then we'll go to the middle age. Then we'll go to the end of life.
So I think you really captured it well in the problem statement that you in the diagram that you were talking about, with this idea of civilization and uncertainty that actually existed within that mass civilization had actually brought upon us, like the cities, that the industrial age, and what consciousness meant in that particular period versus then previous periods, where there was a certain there was a degree of certainty, where we were more tribal, where we were more an agrarian culture, where people had an idea of what, that they didn't necessarily question themselves or the world as the same way they would in the industrial age. And I think that changeover impacted how everybody actually thought about how our consciousness became the collective consciousness in a way. And then within that, the individual's kind of lost. And what happens is there's a number of things that can happen with the human psyche. And that's why we actually started looking into, he started to say this is where modern psychology is the answer to some of these issues, where this is the birth of we've had science, but we've had our, how did he say it in chapter 10? It was beautifully said. We have had our unconscious, but we never really had to deal with it before. And now this is essentially, now we're at a period in our time where, it's kind of emerging, and we kind of need to know how to deal with it. And I think that's a really important part of talking about, if we're talking about consciousness in the beginning stages of our lives, is also the environment that we were in and how we were developing.
No, absolutely. I think that's a really great point. Julian Jaynes makes it really beautifully. He calls it the breakdown of the bicameral mind. So in this diagram, the child mind is the bicameral mind. You're just obeying the parents, obeying whatever the family around you is doing. You're, in the imitation mode. Then the way in which you operated in the imitative way suddenly stops working when you go outside. because the other people are different. So it is like the breakdown of the bicameral mind, because it is the fact that you can no longer deal with the environment, with your surroundings, using the same unconscious methods that you had. You come up with this, you run into this issue of saying, uh-oh, now what shall I do? So there is uncertainty, there is tension, and you have to figure out what to do. Suddenly, everything is not set for you, like paradise, right? Garden of Eden that he talks about. Adam and Eve, they just have to follow whatever they've been told, and they're fine. Moment you eat that fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, then you're taking on the responsibility of trying to figure out what you should do. So that's what I would say. Boo, did you want to comment?
I put in never mind. I don't know.
Never mind. Okay. All right. That's fine. All right. Does anybody else want to comment on this stage? Otherwise, we will go ahead and go to the next one about the middle age. So let's look at the middle age. I'm going to give 5 seconds. Otherwise, let's look at the middle age. The point, fundamental point he's making is that consider the person who has achieved all the values he set out to achieve as a youth. He has a good job, he has a good house, he has a good wife, he has a good children, he's happy. And then what? What do they, so like, what's the next thing? The same things that got him there or got her there no longer seem meaningful. And the pursuit goes in a different direction. He talks about kind of discovery of the self. He talks about, in the psychological functions, Jung talks about development of the third function. So the 2 functions that you're using, it's the third function. It's actually very similar to the point about masculinity and femininity that he's making, is that you basically, you're a whole, you have many different functions, you prioritize some of them in the early part of life, and then you bring in the other ones later on. So folks, if you would like to comment on the nature of the middle age, anything Jung says about it, and what your thoughts are about that. We'll start with Joe. Joe, go ahead.
So one thing that I thought that was interesting when he talked about this is that I like to quote, as you get older, a deeper spiritual understanding becomes necessary. You don't need to educate your conscious will. You don't care about being socially useful anymore. You're now more interested in investigating the meaning of life, and it would be possible to do so by learning and to experience your own inner being. And I think that that's kind of really captures what you're talking about, in the sense that, what you once determined to be meaningful is no longer meaningful. So where are you going to find that? And he even talks about this idea there, culture lies beyond the purpose of nature, and he goes into the idea of culture and wisdom and the importance of that as part of the factor. But the other thing that the person that I found interested when he was talking about the midlife crisis was the pious man that he talked about. That was the church warden that, morality and religion had always been the most important thing in his life. And he said, he says, now I've got it. As a matter of fact, I'm just a plain rascal, nor did this self-realization remain without results. He spent his declining years in riotous living and wasting a goodly or godly part of his fortune. Obviously quite a likable person, capable of both extremes. So, it's kind of like how this person engaged, like how when they met, they came to this crisis, how they actually ended up acting out. You can go one of 2 ways. You can embrace, I think, this older age and start to look for what is truly meaningful to you. Or you can actually just start to have this crisis where, you're got to go do whatever you want. And we see this in all the time with people that, express themselves through going out and buying a fancy sports car or something like that in a middle age, or starts to try and date younger people. And, they're looking for meaning in some other way. So this is kind of coming out. So it's an interesting way he captured the crossroads of a midlife crisis.
Wonderful. Zach, what are your comments about the midlife crisis?
I think that the midlife crisis, the initial midlife crisis, I mean, if you characterize it as a reversion to childhood, like I'm just gonna, like, I think that's kind of like not the full picture that Jung, in my idea of it, is young life is how can I fulfill myself in conformance with society. But if you have elders, I mean, imagine the village elders, like what they should be preoccupied with, how should society be? And in other words, young youth is how should I be with the values being set by society? Whereas like the second half of life should be, or I think more people should just actively reject society and say, look, I've lived in society. This is what's wrong with society. Like the individuation is, I have to go inward to find a way of refining society and culture so that it's more developed and it's more sophisticated. So you're actually trying to, you're now serving society in a way rather than yourself. You're actively trying to, I guess it's just this idea that maybe society doesn't know what it's doing. Maybe it's not going in the right direction, and maybe it needs people to recognize that and use their inner resources.
Wonderful.
To find that direction.
Thank you, Zach. Maritza.
I think also it's so I like the way Zach said that. It's the idea of it's not as simple as we're just you're having a crisis, but I think Jung is inviting us to realize that like there's something in us that wants to like remain a child or embrace because it's easier, because this whole being conscious and embracing stuff is hard. And I think the example of the pious man was the example of someone who never actually internalized their value system. Like they never acknowledged the need for revisitation and assertion of their own, of those things that they truly do value and want to move forward. And I think he showed us that pious man as a way to show us, it's almost like a cautionary tale. Like, yes, he thinks he woke up and realized that he was a rascal, or maybe he was a rascal all along, but he was doing all these other things. It still means that you hit midlife or late life being not true to yourself. And I think that what it makes me think of is blind faith and the cautionary tale of blind faith. And, we should not have blind faith in anything. And so Jung is inviting us all to embrace consciousness and to perpetually seek, different commune with our own sense of consciousness and what all that entails. And I think that what he's proposing in this stage of life is that, our midlife crisis doesn't have to be this ugly, life-wrenching thing if we continuously are seeking to move from, unconscious to conscious. Then that change will not be as drastic or as horrifying, as it were, as some of the examples that he did provide for us.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Maritza. So let's go to the third question, and that is about the end of life. Let's look at end of life as a whole, And this is where actually the way in which, let's say, America looks at end of life and the rest of the world, like older cultures look, is very different. Like in the older culture, there is a tremendous focus on that these folks are the keepers of the culture, keepers of tradition. They are the ballast. They are the base. They typically have there is the archetype of the wise old man, of that you have wisdom that you have gotten from the rest of your life. So those are the 2 points, and then there is a point that he makes about afterlife. So any thoughts about this entire end of life? Go ahead and type exclamation mark. Folks, everybody is very quiet today, so please go ahead. This is the end of life, so please talk about it. So go ahead and type exclamation mark if you'd like to comment. And then we'll open it up for any kind of general questions and general comments. We'll start with Evanik.
Okay, so the way I see it and the way you described it, it's, that older people are the keepers of tradition or culture, and they have the wisdom, and then there's the afterlife, right? And the afterlife is hard to talk about because no one knows, right? We have people that have had near-death experiences or who have flatlined, and they tell you about the bright light, and then the scientists will say, well, that was just the brain functioning that way. So no one really knows. And I like the way Jung puts it, talking about, is there life on Mars? We don't know, and it doesn't matter, right? In a sense, because what he's pointing to is that you have to, I think humans are programmed to know, or programmed to expect something after life. Like, we are programmed in our brains for immortality. Like, we don't want our life to end. Now, maybe that's just a survival mode, and maybe that's our brain functioning that way. But I think there is regardless of whether there's like a religious afterlife or something, there is an end of life stage there, and then there is something after it. Now, maybe we just go back into an unconscious state. I don't know. And hoping not to find out anytime soon. But I think it's like you said, like religion provides something, right? Like, whatever religion you believe in provides something for the end of life, so that you're not scared of it, or that you can go peacefully into it. I don't know. And this is a hard one, but I just figure I just try to put my thoughts out there, and maybe somebody else has some thoughts, because I truly don't know.
Thank you, Evanik. It is truly a difficult topic. Next up is Katie.
Yes, Evanik, you reminded me of a thought. So it reminded me of this discussion where, and I'm pretty sure it was Jung in Stages, but it was talking about how, like, maybe especially like, childhood, youth, Middle Ages, you're probably still not thinking about death yet. And then end of life, because like maybe, childhood, you're exploring, and then youth, you're settling career and family, and then that's decided, and then come middle age, but then end of life, you're starting to focus on the, at some point I'm going to pass away. Like, that starts to come into sharper focus and thinking about, I'm pretty sure it was Jung that was saying that about people, trying to make amends with people and making sure they have those kinds of things. Because I don't think at least I don't. I still feel like death's far away. I feel like I wouldn't be thinking about that in the Middle Ages. Death would still be far away.
Thank you, Katie. Next up is Boo, followed by Maritza.
Yeah, so Evanik, he talks about the afternoon of life being one where it's more focused on cultivating And I think even without believing in like an afterlife per se, he mentions the collective unconscious enough, and how we kind of have the memory of generations, and we're just kind of a link in a chain from the past to the future, so that even if it's not like a religious or traditional afterlife, cultivating not just yourself, but like passing the torch on to others, spreading the lessons you learned from, your younger life, I think still fits in that role of transcending one's own personal boundaries, so I don't know. I know I'm not wording it in the way that you asked or that you did, but those were the thoughts that I was having. Like, you don't need to believe in an otherworldly passing to pass something on, to know that you're part of something bigger than yourself and in the future, just because this body is gonna fade away doesn't mean we're not passing something on to other bodies, so that's what I'd say.
Wonderful. Yesterday's meetup, people were talking about that's what artists do. Artists' visions live on. So does scientists. So the works, your good works, your character, your in memories of others. So there is that. Thank you. Next up is Marisa.
I think that this fourth stage is where we have the most room for spiritual pursuits, as it were. And I think it's like we learn that it's not, I feel like this last stage is where you realize that, the serious problems in life are not ever going to be fully resolved, and that's okay. Like, and that's, I think, how we come to become, or in that phase, how a person in the phase 4 becomes the wisdom for those who are still in the earlier phases in the community, because now in this stage, we're aware that, the meaning and purpose of life doesn't lie in the solution, but it lies in the searching or maybe the journey, even, as it were. And I think that that's something we can only truly come to accept in our consciousness as we enter into that later phase in life, because we become more introspective, and we're asking different types of questions, because at that end you're no longer trying to increase more material goals or such, so you're focusing on the spiritual. And I think that that's part of the reason why that stage also is known for being the stage, the holders of history, the keepers of knowledge, because now they're the sense of ending is upon us, and we want to share anything we think may be of use to someone. And I think that that's, if one is not religiously inclined, the concept of striving towards the afterlife could be viewed as something so simple as that. We are striving to leave a legacy, and you're imparting your knowledge, things that we did the meetup on the Aborigine, and the story, they make certain that the entire story is in the hands of another, so that it can be passed on, and that's how they believe that their ancestors stay alive. And so if the key to immortality is in passing on the knowledge, I think that that's what this fourth stage is all about. It's all about, we're seeking to attain that afterlife, but it doesn't necessarily need to be an afterlife that is, a specific one. There are many ways that can be viewed.
Thank you, Maritza. All right, now what I want to do is I want to open it up for questions. So we'll try to put everybody's questions on the table. Let's see what questions people have about stages of life. Now, don't expect any particular person to answer any of the questions. I just want to put all the questions down, see the shape of the questions, and go from there. So go ahead and type ! If you have questions. Folks, go ahead and type exclamation mark if you have questions. I'm going to just get some water. I'll be back in 30 seconds. We'll go with Boo's question about Nietzsche, and then we'll take, so the next question is by Joe. Joe, what's your question? So we'll just collect all the questions first, and then we will go to answers. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I could actually answer Boo's question in one sentence. I mean, it's essentially that both Jung and Nietzsche don't believe science is sufficient as far as giving meaning to man's life. And I think that that's highlighted in this chapter as well. My question would have been, is that it would have been along the same lines, is that what is the role of science in creating meaning in life? I'm not really clear on that aspect of Jung.
Okay, anybody else? There aren't that many questions, so all right, let's see. It's about 10:42. So firstly, let me tell you about what's coming up. Next, we are going to take the chapter on analytical psychology, the basic postulates of analytical psychology. It's, what is this? Only a description of what is happening, not the meaning why. Katie, I don't know what you mean. Can you speak? Is that a question? Go ahead.
Sure. I remember I started a book. It was entitled The Meaning of Existence. And I think I had read like something like 25, I don't know, 25 or 60 pages. I don't know how much I'd read into it. And I was like, wait a second, this is just a science of what happened and explaining, you know, we go really far back in history, we've evolved from this. And I was like, and then I realized so many pages in, I didn't bring any clarity as to the meaning of anything. It was just telling me like our history and a description of where we came from, and you know, just rather than like the meaning, like why are we here? That doesn't help me get closer to answering that. Well, for me, it doesn't help me get closer.
All right. As Joe and Katie are the only ones who put the questions down, to start my say, okay. Sorry. So as they are the only ones who put the questions down, let's discuss that question in great amount of detail. Okay. I think the best formulation that I have, wait a minute, George has a question. George, can you put a question on the table?
Well, no, I just wanted to quickly respond. Basically, that our conditioning is no. Let me let you speak, then I'll come back with
yeah.
We're
trying to still. If people have questions, they can put an exclamation mark. We'll go from there. Thank you. All right. So the answer that Jung gives, and the answer which is actually presented really well by Jordan Peterson on this, is that science looks at the world as a place of things. There is a second way of looking at it, where they look at it, where you look at the world as a forum for action. Jung, the entire spiritual tradition is looking at the world as a forum for action. That's a very different perspective. It is all focused on meaning. So meaning is a crucial concept. You know, values, meaning is a crucial concept. So it's a very different focus. Now they all come together, but it's a very different focus. Next up is Joe, followed by George. Joe. So
maybe one question I was going to put on the table is just how has childhood development changed from maybe the turn of the century versus now? I think it's, you know, a little bit different. I mean,
yeah, no, I think that's a great question. I mean, there's a lot more, but let's continue on.
Okay.
That question of, you know, meaning of life. How does science deal with it? How do the other traditions deal with it? If anybody has anything that they would like to say, go ahead and type exclamation mark. George,
Thank you, Shrikant. Yeah, so we are conditioned to see clouds as water particles. You know, before science, we had no idea what they were. And then the world was so much more wonderful in so many ways.
Thank you. Thank you, George. It's very interesting. Let's see if there is anything else. Okay, so let me tell you about what's coming up. We're going to next do the basic postulates of analytical psychology. And it's very deep chapter. It's chapter 9. I am enjoying these Jung meetups very well. If anybody would like to talk about what they're getting from the Jung meetups, this is the time, because I have to decide how to actually take these Jung meetups forward. But I want to see what people are getting from it. So if you would like to share what you have learned, what you're getting from these Jung meetups, whether you're very familiar with Jung or not so familiar with Jung, doesn't matter. Next time, of course, George is going to be back. David is going to be back. So we'll have many more people who know this field very well. But if you'd like to share what you're getting from these Jung meetups, go ahead and type exclamation mark. So question is, why study Jung at all? Should we be studying Jung, or are we making a mistake? Zach, should we be studying Jung?
It's a good question. And like, there are some people who think that what Jung is talking about is actually for an extremely small group of people, that like actual individuation is extremely rare, as opposed to just a democracy where everyone gets to go to the the voters booth or something like that. It may well be that Jung was spent a long time researching the alchemists, and the alchemists were.
How about this? Let me ask you a specific question. What are you getting by studying Jung?
Jung was, for me, like what I would call a cartographer of a zone that I had already arrived at, and there really aren't that many people who have mapped out
Wonderful.
This place that I arrived at. Yeah.
What do you think of these meetups? What are you getting from these meetups?
For me, it's a social experience. Like I do need to encounter the world. I spend too much time in my cave, as it were. So I definitely want to make sure that I can still interact successfully with the world.
Joe, what about you? What are you getting from these Jung meetups?
I mean, I'm getting a better understanding of my ego and shadow, and and just how important it is to actually confront those things. Mm-hmm. And the reason as to why it's so important to confront those things as well. I'm also getting a historical understanding of development of psychology. You start to see that, how it evolved. And it can be transformative. I do think people should study Jung. I do think that it's important to, I was in another meetup group about this the other day, and there was, saying there was a group of people that were saying, oh, well, it's still a fringe movement, mm-hmm. meaning, Jung is not widely taught. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's something where that's unfortunate in many ways, because I think that there's a lot that we can, take from our own personal lives. And I think that we are faced with more of an existential crisis today than we were, or the past 75 or more in the modern day, I'll just say that, than we have been in the past. And I think that Jung actually offers some solutions to that problem.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Joe. Nicole, what are you getting from the Jung meetups?
I would love to see the red book.
It's all available. You can get it at the library. It's just wonderful. I would definitely recommend that.
Is it really?
Yes, yes. Most libraries, many public libraries have it.
I don't think they'll have it at my local library.
You should check it out. You should. There is a good chance that they will have it. It's a very common. Thank you.
Okay.
Avanique, what are you getting?
I think the biggest thing I'm learning about is the consciousness and unconsciousness and shadow. What I'm getting is, learning more about my shadow and how it comes out. And I'm also doing a study on the Enneagram, and I'm learning my number and learning the passions around. They call it passions, but it's like the negative influence of my number. So I'm an observer, and the passion is avarice. And I didn't think that fit, but then I thought about when you're looking at Jung and you're studying Jung and what is that thing that you don't want to learn about yourself? And I've been learning that about myself. It causes me to act different. It causes me to think differently and to notice when I'm allowing the shadow to win, which I would have not paid attention to before. Not that I would have not noticed, I just wouldn't have paid attention to before. And so with Jung and studying the shadow and also listening to Jordan Peterson, which helps me better understand that concept, and the beauty in understanding that concept so that ego or that shadow doesn't show up in ways that you don't want it to, or if it does, you can make amends for it, and you can watch it and understanding that everybody else has their shadows. So it helps me better to forgive myself when they come up in ways that I don't like. And it also helps me to know the self that I am. And it also helps me better become the self that I want to be. And I have more of a choice knowing that unconsciousness thought or recognizing that unconsciousness. So I think studying Jung is great. I think I believe everybody should study it. I think if people understood it, people would be happier with their lives, I think, or at least happier about how they're dealing with their lives. And I think that's what Jung does. It helps you deal with life. Life is not a bed of roses, but this is how you deal with it. So very new to Jung, but thoroughly enjoying the series.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Avanique. Next up is Paul.
Yeah, hi. I've been not as religious an attendee of these, but enough that for my purposes, I'm answering the question of what I get out of these things, that especially the conversation on Abraxas, and I view Jung as sort of one of a series of really big thinkers who tried to take the whole of human history and synthesize it into a set of ideas and theories at a very important time. So even if I don't agree or something, he fires the imagination. He gives you a frame based on a whole lot of brain and a whole lot of thinking that's just exciting, especially if you look at it that way and try to express it from that same place, which you tried to do, Shrikant. So I favor continuing along those lines, not because he was the major predecessor to some new school of psychotherapy, but because he took the really big ideas and made a really amazing effort at trying to sort of synthesize them. So that's
wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you. Boo, What do you get from these meetups?
Well, this is, I think, the first meetup I've been to on Jung. I think I've visited you in another meetup about the Tao Te Ching once upon a time. But no, well, I don't completely agree with Jung. I think he was a pioneer for his time, but I think other people influenced by him have come out since then. So, I mean, I like him as a topic, and I definitely like the people who have been influenced by him. But like just one example on my mind, it was something that I didn't say earlier, was that so he talks about consciousness as something that arises because of conflict, you know, and I just didn't want to like throw a monkey wrench in the format of which you were speaking about it, but no, I'm of the understanding from other psychology that's influenced by Jung that once you've gotten rid of a conflict, whether it's within or without, whether it's with one of your unconscious complexes or conscious one, or whether it's in the external world, you're not conscious of it anymore. You're either habituated to it or you've solved the problem. And therefore, consciousness is actually really expensive, metabolically speaking, and that the goal isn't actually to become more conscious in life or to have more complex consciousness. But I think it's something that happens as a blessing and a curse to people, that they have a higher order of consciousness, of a qualitative nature. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they're more conscious, and that it comes with suffering, like Jung was talking about the artist, how he might be a criminal or might suffer a lot or might have foregone a normal life. And I think it's related to what Zach was saying earlier about some people aren't meant to fit in. Jung mentioned that in one of the other chapters about some people look at the normal life as not good enough, and that's natural. For those people, they need a different kind of integration, a unity in life. So no, well, it's just oh no, I didn't feel like I got a chance to say that. So if the tone of the conversation is how is he right, I just feel like it's a little bit exegetical, you know, and that it's not really, I don't get to throw in the, well, you know, he was really good. He was really on point and accurate in a lot of ways, but also there's some shortcomings that, I don't know. I don't think just mine that I brought up just now is the only one. I think plenty of other people could throw in their 2 cents, but that was what I was thinking. And it's why I prefer more conversational style for when people disagree. And that's to justify my comment in the chat. So thank you.
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Boo. So firstly, everybody should feel free to disagree with Jung. So if I wanted to kind of summarize my disagreements with Jung. So firstly, I've got tremendous respect for him. And I mean, for me, anybody who is an original thinker, who takes on the problem of his days, problems of his days directly and tries his best to figure it out over decades, I have, hats off to him. So no matter what else what I disagree with them, the primary thing is that he's actually engaging the problem, which most people actually refuse to even see, because that's so much part of the furniture, part of the context, that they don't even notice it. So I think he is very good. He has a very curious mind, and he is making observations at so many different levels all the time. And he has the attitude of a student. He's always trying to correct himself, understand things in greater amount of depth. He's also an artist. He expresses himself, whatever he understands. So it's a good example of this breaking in and breaking out. The core of his strength is his understanding of the unconscious, I think. That's really the core of his strength. So the places where I disagree with him are the interaction between outside and inside. Somebody like Louis Sullivan actually gets that interaction better, because Jung is largely focused on the inside. He doesn't fully get the structure of the outside, the nature of the outside, and how it interacts. So that interaction between outside and inside, I think he's limited by that. Second is that I do have, I really love his work on the interaction between conscious and unconscious. But I think people like Julian Jaynes have that understanding of the conscious part better than Jung, and people like Jung have the idea of unconscious better. The third part is that it's the fact that he is a psychoanalyst who deals with a lot of problems. A lot of that seeps into his work. I think somebody like, again, I'm using Louis Sullivan as an example here, as a contrast, who's focused on building the world, is not as much focused on individual psychological problems, but what are the general principles and what is possible. So the emphasis, I certainly prefer the emphasis of Louis Sullivan as compared to Carl Jung, as to the amount of time spent on what can particularly go wrong with particular people. I mean, that was his work, that was his life. That's what he did most of the time, the analyzing of problems of other people. So I fully understand what it's coming from. But for me, it is less useful than other people. So these are some of the things that I disagree on. The reason I'm very excited about doing meetups on Carl Jung is that in the psychology area, I find him to be far more integrative. Even after complaining about all of these things, he is more integrative about the outside and the inside, about the conscious and the unconscious than other people. He is more focused on the positive than other people. His idea of self is truly exalted. So what is possible to human beings? So those are some of the things. And I think so, these are some of the reasons that I want to do meetups on Carl Jung. Maritza, what are you getting?
So I was going to comment a little bit on the concept of consciousness versus unconsciousness. I hadn't realized before that how few philosophers tackle the concepts head on. Like in general, so many of them kind of sidestep the direct head on focus, like Jung does. For me, what I'm getting most out of the discussions we've had thus far is I'm being introduced to Jung from a more artistic perspective. Like I previously, everything I'd read of Jung, I thought he was a little bit more dry. But you're presenting us with different essays that I had not read before, and it just shows a different side of him. So I find I'm enjoying that. But another one is that the idea of, conscious and unconscious, I've been really interested in the idea of, we go from just floating around in life to kind of intentionally shaping our lives. And I see that concept in some of what Jung is saying. So it just makes me interested in reading more.
Wonderful. Thank you, Maritza. Well, thank you, everybody. Just want to let you know, tomorrow we're looking at Bhagavad Gita. We're starting with chapter 17 tomorrow. And we are going to have a special session on Bhagavad Gita on Sunday. So we're doing Fridays and Sundays, and the aim is to wrap up Bhagavad Gita in about 6 to 7 weeks. That's the plan. All right. Thank you very much, folks. See you soon. Bye.